Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 26, Reliability, Validity and Triangulation. And our topic is Ethical Considerations in Qualitative Research. Fieldwork is one of the key methodological tools employed in qualitative research. Fieldwork raises some unique ethical issues because the researcher is participating in the lives of people under study. It often becomes difficult to draw the line between the researcher's role as a participant and as an observer. Some social scientists believe that the researcher should make it clear to her or his subjects what he or she is doing, and under no circumstances should be the subject withhold his or her true intentions. In other words, he or she should make it clear that he or she is conducting a research inquiry. However, in reality, this is easier said than done. Suppose a researcher is attending a wedding in the community he or she is studying. This is an excellent opportunity to interact with several members of the community and elicit information. If the researcher announces his or her intention on such an occasion, she or he is likely to alienate members or cause a lot of discomfort to them. Shields tries to draw a distinction between the observations of everyday life and the observations of field research. The former refers to observations that result from the social relationships that arise out of intentions other than observations. The observer has not created the relationship merely for the purpose of doing research. What happens, however, when observations from daily life, where there is no intention of doing research, later acquire significance for the research? Kidder and Jude cite the instance of a researcher working as volunteer with rape victims in a hospital emergency ward. Her work as a volunteer helped her gain insights in the victims' methods of coping that appeared to contradict the current psychological theories of coping and taking control. Could she use her findings? The woman she had talked to had not been informed that she was doing research, because at the time she was working with them, she was not in fact conducting research, but doing voluntary work. Edson identified the following ethical consideration that a researcher must bear in mind: protecting the subject from physical and psychological harm, protecting the subject's privacy and confidentiality, protecting the subject against unjustifiable deception, and acquiring the informed consent of the subject. The above points are interrelated. For example, in order to protect the subject from physical or psychological harm, the researcher must also protect his privacy and not deceive him. Erlandson quotes the example of a researcher studying a prison system. Because some staff and inmates were in highly sensitive situations, revealing their identities could seriously harm their personal safety and career. The same applies to research pertaining to homosexual sex workers, etc., who are stigmatized in our society. The researcher should take into account the potential risks and participants face if they are identified. The prison researcher decided to use pseudonyms and omitted information that were potentially damaging. He also made the decision not to distinguish his own role or the reason why he was in the organization. The issue of deception or concealing one's identity is a very tricky one. It is argued that sometimes a researcher can gain access to society's darker side by gaining entry into it and becoming one of the group. One reads of journalistic corps in which writers pretend to be prisoners and live in a prison in order to gain the inside information, or pretend to be potential clients of sex workers or massage parlors operating as sex shops in order to write about their sensational exposes. However, serious social science is not journalism. Allenson opined that deception is subversive to the research effort and counterproductive to the search for multiple social constructions that individuals hold. To obtain the informed consent of the participants, the researcher must explain to them clearly the goals of his or her research and allay their natural fears. Suppose a researcher is studying interreligious marriages and is trying to obtain the consent of couples that have had such marriages. Some of the natural fears the potential participants might have could include the following. Is the researcher working on behalf of some politico-religious organization that wishes to identify and expose them? Will their privacy be guarded? Will their families be subject to social embarrassment or censure? Will parents have problem in arranging the marriage of a younger sister or brother if it is known that the older sister married into another religion against her parents' wishes? By discussing these issues frankly and clarifying the strategies by which their privacy and confidentiality can be protected, the researcher may be able to obtain their informed consent and thus accord them due to respect and safeguard their dignity and human rights. In order to further appreciate the point of ethical concerns of ethnographers, we can complete reflection and action. Now let us conclude the unit. The issue of validity and reliability are problematic ones in qualitative research precisely because qualitative methods demand a lot of personal engagement from the researcher. The risk of researcher going native, that is identifying herself or himself so completely with the people under study that she or he then becomes a spokesperson for their issues and interests, is also significant. The researcher must at one and the same time be both a participant and an observer, doing research and yet interacting with subjects in their own territory, on their own terms. Several techniques have been identified by which the researcher keeps a scrumptious and detailed record of work done, separating the views of the actors from one's own. This includes the technique of triangulation. Interwoven with these methodological considerations is the moral imperative that the need to recognize and respect the fact that the subjects of research are human beings who must be treated with respect and accorded the dignity that every human being deserves. Now let us wind up the session, and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self-Learning podcast.